It was a quiet afternoon in Los Angeles when Michael Jackson received a request that would change the rest of his day and the life of one fan forever. The message was simple but devastating. A young woman was dying of a rare illness. She had only one wish left: to meet Michael Jackson before it was too late. Michael had rehearsals scheduled, meetings lined up, and security advising against any unscheduled visits. But the moment he heard her story, he stopped everything. What happened next would leave doctors in tears, nurses in silence, and one fragile fan with smiles she hadn't worn in weeks. Because on her final day, Michael Jackson didn't act like a superstar. He acted like something far greater. What did Michael do inside that hospital room? Why did everyone who witnessed it say they would never forget that moment as long as they lived? And what final gift did he leave with her that no amount of money could ever replace? Stay with me, because this is one of the most powerful, emotional, and human stories ever told about Michael Jackson. Before we begin this incredible story, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter of these true moments from Michael Jackson's life. The call came just after noon. Michael Jackson had been in the middle of a rehearsal break at Quiet Studio in Hollywood, sitting alone near the back wall with a bottle of water in his hands. The mirrors were fogged from hours of dancing, the air thick with sweat and music that still echoed faintly in the room. His body was exhausted, his mind even more so. The upcoming tour consumed nearly every waking thought. Then Frank Dillio's phone rang. At first, it seemed like any other interruption. Another schedule change, another business issue, another request that would probably decline for security or timing. But the expression on Frank's face changed as he listened. The room grew still. He glanced toward Michael, who noticed immediately. Frank stepped away, lowered his voice, and spoke for several minutes. When he returned, he didn't speak right away. He simply looked at Michael. "There's a girl," Frank finally said. "She's 23. Late-stage cancer. Doctors say she doesn't have much time. Maybe hours. Her family reached out. Her last wish is to meet you." Michael's eyes softened instantly. "Where is she?" he asked. Frank hesitated. "Downtown. St. Jude's Memorial. It's not on the schedule. Security will say no. The doctors." Michael stood up before Frank could finish. "Where is she?" Frank blinked. Frank, Michael said quietly, "Where is she?" Frank gave him the address. There was no further discussion. Michael walked past the choreographers, the dancers, the assistants, the security team, who immediately began protesting. "We'll be late for the afternoon session. The press might find out. The hospital hasn't cleared anything. This isn't safe." Michael didn't argue. He simply put on his jacket, picked up his sunglasses, and headed for the door. "I'm going," he said. No one tried to stop him after that. The hospital room was small, too small for the number of emotions inside it. The young woman lay propped up against white pillows, her skin pale, her breathing slow and shallow. Her name was Emily. Tubes ran from her arms. Machines whispered quietly beside her bed. Her parents sat on either side, holding her hands, their faces hollow from days of grief that had already begun. The nurse stepped inside and whispered, "He's here." Emily's eyes shifted toward the door. At first, she didn't react. Then she saw him. Michael stepped into the room slowly, gently, as if afraid the moment might break if he moved too quickly. He removed his sunglasses the second he entered. His eyes met hers. Emily gasped. Her lips trembled. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "It's you." Michael crossed the room and took her hand with both of his. "It's me," he said softly. "I came to see you." Her fingers tightened around his. She was shaking. "I didn't think you would really come," she said. Michael knelt beside the bed, so they were eye to eye. "I promised myself I would," he replied. "And when I promise something, I keep it." Her mother turned away, covering her mouth as she cried. Emily tried to sit up more. Michael helped adjust her pillows. He stayed right there, never letting go of her hand. They talked, not about fame, not about music. They talked about her childhood, her favorite songs, how she used to dance in her room, How she went to her first concert with her father when she was 12. How she always dreamed of meeting him, but never thought it would really happen. Michael listened like nothing else in the world existed. Minutes passed, then an hour. Doctors stood outside the room, watching through glass. Nurses slowed their steps. Even the hospital noise seemed to soften around that doorway. At one point, Emily whispered, "Can you sing for me?" Michael didn't hesitate. He leaned closer and began to sing quietly, not performing, not projecting, just singing to her. His voice was gentle, trembling with emotion. It wasn't a song from an album. It was a melody he made up for her, a lullaby. Emily closed her eyes. Tears slid down her cheeks. Her breathing slowed. When the song ended, she whispered, "Thank you for making today beautiful." Michael pressed his forehead against her hand. "You made my day beautiful," he said. Emily looked at him with a peaceful smile. "I'm not scared anymore." Those were the last words she ever spoke. Her chest rose once more, and then it didn't. The monitor went still. The room fell silent. Emily's mother let out a sound no human should ever have to make. Her father collapsed against the wall. The nurse rushed in. The doctor followed. Michael did not move. He stayed kneeling beside the bed, still holding Emily's hand, his face wet with tears. Long after the machine stopped. Long after the room had gone quiet. Long after the world outside continued on. Michael Jackson stayed. When he finally stood, he turned to her parents. "I will never forget her," he said, "as long as I live." He placed something on the pillow beside Emily's hand, a small silver bracelet he had been wearing, engraved with the word love. Then he leaned down and kissed her forehead, and walked out. If you're ready for what happened after he left that hospital, and how this single moment changed Michael forever. Michael left the hospital without speaking. The hallway felt longer than before, colder, heavier. His shoes echoed against the polished floor, as if the building itself were holding its breath. Outside the room, the world had not stopped. Phones buzzed, nurses whispered, carts rolled by. Yet everything inside Michael had gone quiet. When the elevator doors closed, he finally allowed his shoulders to drop. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. For a moment, he could still feel Emily's fingers wrap around his. The warmth of a life that had just slipped away. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the doors opened and his security team stepped forward automatically. Frank was there too, his face pale, his voice unsure. "Michael, are you okay?" Michael nodded once, but the movement carried no conviction. They walked outside. Cameras were already waiting across the street. Someone always knew. But for once, Michael didn't care. He slid into the back seat of the car and stared out the window as the city moved past him, bright and indifferent. No one spoke during the drive. The car eventually pulled into the gates of Neverland. The familiar iron doors closed behind them with a slow metallic sound. Normally, arriving there brought Michael comfort. That afternoon, it felt like he was returning from another world. He went straight to his bedroom and shut the door. Hours passed. No music, no phone calls, no visitors. He lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of the hospital visit. Emily's smile, her voice, the way her eyes had relaxed when he sang. The moment the machines went silent. For the first time in a long time, Michael did not try to escape the pain. He let it sit with him. As evening fell, the house staff began to worry. Dinner was untouched. Rehearsals were canceled. Frank knocked gently on the door. "Michael?" No answer. Frank opened the door slowly. Michael was sitting on the floor near the window, knees drawn to his chest, staring at the sky as it darkened. "I keep thinking about her," Michael said without turning around. "About how she smiled at me. About how she wasn't afraid." Frank stepped inside and sat beside him. "You gave her a beautiful gift," he said. Michael shook his head. "She gave me one." They sat in silence for a long time. Later that night, Michael walked into his private studio. He turned on the lamp, the soft yellow light spilling across the piano. He sat down and placed his fingers on the keys. At first, nothing came. Then slowly a melody, soft, unfinished, fragile, He played the tune he had sung to Emily, over and over again, each time adding something new. A chord here, a pause there. Tears slid down his face and dropped onto the keys. By dawn, the song had a shape. It had no title. He wrote one word at the top of the page. Emily. The next morning, Michael returned to the hospital alone. No security. No cameras. No announcements. Emily's parents were still there, sitting quietly in the same chairs. When they saw him, they stood in surprise. "You came back," her mother whispered. Michael nodded. I promised I would never forget her. He spent the next 2 hours with them, listening to stories about Emily's childhood. Her laugh, the way she loved animals, how she used to play his songs in her room when she couldn't sleep. Michael laughed softly through his tears. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and handed them a folded paper. "It's a song," he said, "for her. I wrote it last night." Emily's father opened the page with trembling hands. He looked up at Michael. "Thank you." Michael bowed his head. "She changed me." News of the hospital visit spread, quietly at first. A nurse posted about it. Then a doctor confirmed it. Within days, the story was everywhere. Michael Jackson visits terminal cancer patient on her final day, stays for hours, sings to her as she passes. But the public would never know what truly happened inside that room. They would never know the way Michael cried on the drive home, the way he wrote her song at sunrise, the way her courage haunted him. Weeks later, during a private rehearsal, Michael stopped the band. "I want to try something new," he said. They played the melody he had written. When it ended, the room was silent. "That," one of the musicians whispered, "is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." Michael simply nodded. He never recorded it. He never released it. He said the song belonged to Emily. And to that day, 3 weeks after Emily's passing, Michael Jackson stepped onto the stage in Tokyo. The arena was full. Lights blazed. The roar of 40,000 voices shook the ceiling. From the outside, it looked like another legendary performance. But inside Michael's chest, everything had changed. He stood behind a curtain, gloved hands resting on the edge of the stage, listening to the crowd chant his name. Normally, that sound fed him energy. That night, it felt distant, like a storm he was watching through thick glass. Frank leaned close. 2 minutes. Michael nodded. His thoughts were not on the set list, not on the choreography, not on the cameras. They were on a small hospital room, on a girl with no hair and a brave smile, on the final breath he had witnessed. When the curtain rose, the crowd erupted. Michael walked into the light, and the world saw the legend. But the man inside the legend was carrying something new, a quiet vow. The concert moved like a dream, song after song, dance after dance. Then, during the bridge of Heal the World, Michael suddenly stopped singing. The band kept playing softly. The crowd grew confused. Michael raised his hand. Silence fell. "I met someone recently," he said into the microphone. Her name was Emily. No one in the arena knew who Emily was. She was very sick and very brave, and she taught me something important. His voice trembled slightly. She reminded me that every heartbeat is a gift. He looked across the ocean of faces. "Tonight, I want us to remember that." The audience listened, completely still. Michael finished the song in near silence. No fireworks, no spectacle, just 40,000 people breathing together. After the show, backstage was unusually quiet. The dancers whispered. The musicians moved carefully. Frank approached Michael. "You changed the whole mood out there." Michael smiled faintly. "Good." In the months that followed, something shifted. Fans began noticing it. Michael stayed longer after shows. He listened more. He reached deeper into the crowd, locking eyes with people as if trying to memorize their faces. He started visiting children's hospitals without telling anyone. No press, no announcements. Just Michael, walking through the halls with stuffed animals under his arm. One night in Berlin, after a concert, he spotted a young boy waiting near the exit with a sign that read, "I'm sick too." Michael stopped. Security hesitated. But Michael waved them away. The boy's hands shook as he held the sign. "What's your name?" Michael asked. "Luca." Michael knelt down in front of him. "How old are you, Luca?" 10. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. When Michael finally left, the boy was crying, not from sadness, but from something new. Hope. Back at Neverland, Michael kept a small box on his bedside table. Inside it were notes, photos, and letters. At the top lay the song page with Emily's name written in his handwriting. He often opened the box late at night, reading the letters fans had written about moments they shared with him. A hand held, a smile, a hug, a whispered encouragement. He realized something slowly and painfully. The world saw him as a star, but he had the power to be something far more important. A moment of light in someone's darkest day. That responsibility began to guide everything he did. One afternoon, while preparing for a charity event, Michael turned to Frank. "I don't want more fame," he said quietly. "I want more time with people." Frank nodded. "I think Emily showed you that." Michael swallowed. "She did." Years later, long after Michael's passing, Emily's mother would speak about that hospital day in an interview. She said, "Michael Jackson didn't come to say goodbye. He came to give my daughter something she carried with her when she left this world, joy." And the song Michael wrote for Emily, it was never released, but the melody lived on in every hospital visit, every extra moment after a show, every time Michael reached for a stranger in a crowd and refused to let go too soon. The night Michael returned to his hotel in Berlin, he did not sleep. The city lights flickered outside the window, but his thoughts were somewhere else, in a small white hospital room, in the sound of Emily's breathing, in the way she had squeezed his hand as if holding on to the last safe place she knew. He sat on the edge of the bed, jacket still on, glove resting on the table. There are promises we make with words, and others we make with the heart. Michael had made one that day. No cameras, no witnesses, no applause, just a vow to himself. The following weeks of the tour moved quickly, but Michael began reshaping his schedule without telling anyone why. More hospital visits, more time after concerts, more quiet moments where he stayed behind while the world rushed past him. In Rome, he met a boy named Matteo who had lost his leg in an accident. They talked about music and superheroes. Michael gave him a black fedora and said, "This makes you unstoppable." In Madrid, he sat with twin sisters battling leukemia, braiding their scarves into crowns and calling them queens. In Paris, he walked into a children's ward unannounced and left the room in tears. His team worried about his health. He was losing weight, sleeping less, feeling more. But Michael refused to slow down. "If I can still walk," he said, "I can still help." One evening in Amsterdam, after another exhausting show, Frank found him alone in the dressing room, staring at his reflection. "You're carrying something heavy," Frank said gently. Michael didn't answer at first. Then, "I keep thinking about how little time we all have." Frank nodded. "And how many people never feel seen?" Michael added. "Not even once." He turned away from a mirror. "I don't want to be remembered for records. I want to be remembered for moments." That promise followed him home. At Neverland, he changed things. He reopened the gates to children from shelters and hospitals. He spent afternoons teaching them how to moonwalk on the grass. He listened when they talked, really listened. Sometimes he would simply sit beside them and let silence do the work. One night, he stood on the balcony watching the kids chase fireflies and whispered himself, "This is the real show." Years later, one of those children would say, "Michael didn't just entertain us. He made us feel like the world still wanted us." But even as he gave so much of himself, something inside Michael was changing. He was becoming quieter, more fragile, more aware of the clock. Late at night, he would open Emily's song page and add small notes, lyrics that would never be finished. Sometimes he wrote only one word, hope. In New York, near the end of the tour, a young woman approached him backstage. She was shaking. "My sister, she's sick," the woman said. "She listens to your music every night. Could you just write her name?" Michael took the marker. "What's her name?" "Lily." He wrote it carefully on a piece of paper and added a small heart. When he handed it back, the woman started crying. Michael placed his hands around hers. "She's not alone," he said. And for that woman, and for Lily, the world became just a little lighter. Michael knew he could not save everyone, but he also knew something else. He could make the time they'd feel less lonely, and that, he decided, was everything. One night, after the final show of the tour, he stayed on the empty stage long after the crowd had left. The lights were dim. The seats were silent. He stood at the center, closed his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you, Emily." He didn't know if anyone could hear him, but he felt something, a quiet peace. That promise he made in the hospital, he never spoke it aloud, but he kept it in every step, every song, every hand he held. The envelope arrived on a rainy morning. No return address, only his name written in careful blue ink. Michael had just finished a rehearsal when his assistant placed it on the table beside his tea. "You might want to open this one yourself," she said. He waited until he was alone. Then he picked it up. There are letters that carry news, and letters that carry hearts. This was the second kind. Inside, the paper was folded neatly. The handwriting was shaky but determined. "Dear Michael, my name is Sarah. I am Emily's mother." Michael's chest tightened. He sat. Emily passed away peacefully last night. The room became very still. He did not cry at first. He simply held the paper in both hands, as if it were fragile glass. "She wasn't afraid. She talked about you all the time. She said you were her hero. She said that when you sang for her, the pain disappeared. She said the song you wrote for her made her believe in tomorrow, even when tomorrow wasn't promised." Michael closed his eyes. "Before she went to sleep for the last time, she asked me to make sure you knew something. She said, 'Tell Michael I wasn't scared. Tell him I was happy.'" His breathing broke. A tear landed on the paper. "You gave my daughter something no doctor could. You gave her joy at the end of her life. For that, I will be grateful for the rest of mine." The letter ended with one simple line. "She loved you." Michael pressed the page to his chest. And finally he wept. For days afterward, he moved slowly. He still rehearsed, still smiled for the cameras, still waved to fans. But something inside him was walking in a different world. One afternoon, he sat at the piano and played the melody he had written for Emily. He added new words, soft ones, words no one would ever hear. A week later, he asked Frank to drive him somewhere unexpected. "Where?" Frank asked. "Someplace quiet." They drove to a small hillside outside the city. No people, no noise, just sky and wind and trees. Michael stepped out of the car with the letter in his pocket. He stood there for a long time. Then he spoke. "Thank you for trusting me with her." The wind carried the words. From that moment on, Michael changed the way he performed. Every concert ended with the same song, the one for Emily, though no one in the audience knew why it mattered so much to him. He sang it differently, not louder, not stronger, deeper. On stage in Tokyo, after finishing the song, he looked out at the crowd and said, "Never forget your life matters. Every single one of you." The audience roared, but Michael wasn't speaking to them. He was speaking to one little girl who no longer needed to hear it. Backstage that night, a young boy approached him. "My sister is sick," the boy whispered. Michael knelt. "What's her name?" "Rose." He smiled softly. "Tell Rose that someone out here believes in her very much." The boy nodded, eyes shining. Michael began writing letters of his own, to children, to parents, to hospitals. Sometimes he sent gifts, sometimes only words. But every envelope carried the same message. You are not invisible. Months passed. The tour ended. But the promise he made never stopped. Even on the hardest days, when his body hurt and the world felt heavy, he remembered Emily's words. Tell him I was happy. And somehow, that made him stronger. Years later, after Michael was gone, Sarah would donate Emily's hospital drawings to a children's foundation. On the back of one picture was written, "Michael made me brave." That picture would hang in a hospital hallway where other children would stop and stare. And hope. Because sometimes the greatest legacy is not the songs you leave behind, but the lives you touch quietly, forever. The night of the final concert was warm. The kind of warm that settles gently on the skin and makes the air feel alive. Backstage, Michael stood alone in front of the mirror, adjusting his glove. He looked tired, deeply tired, but peaceful. The kind of peace that comes after a long journey, when you finally understand why you were walking it. On the table beside him lay Emily's letter, folded thin from how many times he had carried it in his pocket. He touched it once before stepping toward the stage. When the lights rose, the crowd exploded. Thousands of voices became one. Michael felt the sound vibrate through his bones. He danced. He sang. He smiled. But something was different. His eyes searched the crowd as if he were looking for someone only he could see. And then it was time for the final song. The one he never announced. The one no one questioned. The one that always left him standing in silence at the end. The music began softly. Michael closed his eyes and sang. Not for fame. Not for history. Not for the world. He sang for every child who had ever whispered his name in a hospital bed. For every mother who had ever held a trembling hand. For every soul that had learned how to hope because someone cared. The arena fell into a hush so deep it felt sacred. When the song ended, Michael remained still. Then he spoke. Before I go, I want to say something. The crowd leaned in. There are people in this world who never get a second chance. People who teach us what really matters, love, kindness, and being brave even when you're afraid. His voice wavered. This song, this life, is for them. He bowed his head. The lights dimmed. The concert was over. Weeks later, the world changed forever. But something Michael had set into motion did not stop. The children's hospitals continued receiving letters, written in Michael's handwriting, but mailed after he was gone. The envelopes were dated months earlier. Some were scheduled to be sent years into the future. Inside, each one was a message. Sometimes it was only a sentence, sometimes a whole page, but each ended the same. You are not alone. You are loved, and you are important. Doctors noticed something remarkable. Children who received the letters smiled more, asked for less pain medication, talked about the future, even when the future was fragile. Nurses called it the Michael effect. Parents called it a miracle. One evening, in a hospital room across the ocean, a young girl named Rose, the same Rose whose brother had spoken to Michael years earlier, opened one of the letters. Her mother read it aloud. Dear Rose, I don't know your story, but I know your strength. You are braver than you realize, and you matter more than you know. Your friend, Michael. Rose smiled, and for the first time in weeks, she slept without pain. Years passed. Michael Jackson became a legend, a memory, a voice in the wind of history. But something else survived him. Hope. In hospitals, teachers began telling new patients the story of the man who once sang for a dying girl named Emily and changed everything after that. In schools, children learned not just his music, but his kindness. In quiet homes around the world, parents kept his letters folded in drawers like sacred things. One afternoon, Sarah, Emily's mother, visited the small hill where Michael had once stood alone with her daughter's letter. She placed a stone on the ground. Then another. She whispered. She was happy. The wind answered. Michael Jackson had once said, if you enter this world knowing you were loved, you can leave it knowing you were needed. And in the end, that became his truest song. Not written on paper, not sung on stage, but carried in the lives of those who learned how to hope because he showed them how.